Imagine, like, walking into a massive established church, right? And you just drop this enormous bag of cash on the altar.
Just a giant pile of money.
Exactly. And then you announce to the leadership that the creator of the universe, like the God they've been worshiping this entire time, is actually the bad guy.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite an entrance.
Right. And then on top of that, you demand a complete reboot of the religion. I mean, it sounds like the plot of some bizarre historical fiction thriller. But in 144 CE, one wealthy shipping magnate tried to do exactly that.
It is honestly one of the most staggering, audacious moments in ancient history. And I think people don't realize this wasn't just some fringe movement that fizzled out in a week.
Yeah, it had real staying power.
Oh, absolutely. This attempted reboot established rival churches, its own bishops, its own sacraments across the entire Roman Empire. It survived for centuries as this massive existential threat to early Orthodox Christianity.
And that is our mission for today. We are taking a deep dive into a really fascinating theological paper. It's called A Critical Theological Examination of Marcionism through its own textual resources by Frank Leo, Moshe Levi, and Frangiscos Moises Levitakis.
Actually, there is only one author. All the names mentioned are the author's names in different languages.
It's a great paper.
It really is. But here is the brilliant twist for you listening today. We aren't just looking at the wild things this ancient movement believed.
Right, because that's been done.
Exactly. We are looking at the mechanics of how the paper's authors used this movement's own carefully edited, heavily redacted rulebook to completely dismantle its theories from the inside out.
We are essentially analyzing an ancient, meticulously documented case of textual self-sabotage.
Textual self-sabotage, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, the founder of this movement tried to surgically alter ancient documents to fit his radical new worldview. But because of the sheer physical difficulty of editing manuscripts back then, he left his fingerprints all over the crime scene.
And a few massive logical landmines, too.
Oh, totally. They're everywhere.
Okay, let's unpack this. It is basically like a hostile corporate takeover. Marcion comes in with a ton of cash, tries to rebrand the entire religion, and fires the original founder.
That is exactly what it is.
So who is the mastermind behind this cosmic reboot? I mean, we are talking about a man named Marcion of Sinope. How does a guy get the confidence to try and buy out a religion?
Well, it helps to have astronomical wealth, for starters.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. Marcion was born around 85 CE in Sinope, which was a really prosperous port city on the southern coast of the Black Sea.
Okay, so he's a cosmopolitan guy.
Very much so. He was a wealthy ship owner, this international businessman. But interestingly, he was also the son of a local bishop.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. So he wasn't an outsider.
Not at all. He grew up deeply steeped in early church teachings. But to understand why he wanted to drastically change those teachings, we have to look at the massive geopolitical shifts happening right before he arrived in Rome.
Right, because history doesn't just, happen in a vacuum. What is the mechanism driving this desire for a massive theological shift?
It all really traces back to the Bar Kokhba revolt in Judea.
Okay.
Which ended around 136 CE. So this was a massive, bloody Jewish uprising against the Roman Empire.
And Rome does not take kindly to uprisings.
No, they do not. Rome eventually crushed the rebellion, and the fallout was severe. The Roman Emperor Hadrian effectively made Jewish practices illegal.
Wow.
Yeah, and he expelled Jews from Jerusalem. So suddenly, throughout the Roman Empire, there was this immense political and cultural hostility toward anything Jewish.
So if you're associated with Judaism in the Roman capital, that becomes incredibly dangerous, or at least like a massive social liability.
Very much so. And Christianity, at this point, it was still deeply tied to its Jewish roots.
I mean, they shared the same Hebrew scriptures.
Exactly. And they worshiped the same creator God. So Marcion, arriving in Rome around 140 CE, seems to have looked at this political climate and realized something.
He saw a branding crisis.
Yes. He realized that if Christianity was going to survive and appeal to the broader Greco-Roman world, it needed to completely sever its ties with Judaism in the Old Testament.
He decided to force a hard pivot. And the sources note he actually showed up at the Roman Church and handed over a fortune, 200,000 sesterces.
Which was an unimaginable sum of money back then.
Unbelievable. He was essentially trying to fund his own theological takeover.
Right.
But his ideas were so extreme that by 144 CE, the Roman Church actually did the unthinkable. They excommunicated him and handed all that money back.
You know, a second-century institution is terrified of your ideas when they return a giant bag of cash.
Seriously. I mean, prominent church fathers viewed him as a profound danger.
Oh, yeah. Polycarp, who was a major early leader, reportedly bumped into Marcion in the street once.
Oh, I've had this story.
It's famous. Marcion asks him, "Do you recognize us?" And Polycarp just looks at him and replies, "I recognize the firstborn of Satan."
That is quite the greeting. Just brutal.
They did not mince words back then.
No, they did not. So let's break down the actual theology that caused this panic. Because Marcion didn't just, tweak a few rules. He introduced absolute ditheism.
A two-God system.
Right. So how did he justify that?
Well, he argued that if you look at the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the God depicted there is, well, he's wrathful, he's strictly legalistic and jealous.
Basically not a fun guy.
Exactly. Marcion called this God the demiurge, or the creator, and he pointed to specific passages to back this up, like Isaiah 45:7.
And that one say.
The creator literally says, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil."
Oh. And create evil. I see how Marcion ran with that.
Right. He took that completely literally. He decided this creator God was fundamentally flawed, and therefore the physical material universe he created must also be flawed, painful, and evil.
So matter itself is bad, which means, in his mind, there has to be a better alternative. Enter God number 2.
The supreme God, or sometimes called the stranger God.
And Marcion claimed this higher deity was just pure love and mercy, completely removed from the gross physical universe.
Completely separate, yeah.
And crucially, this supreme God was an absolute stranger to humanity until he suddenly, revealed himself by sending Jesus Christ to save us from the Creator.
It's a very clean binary system. The creator God of justice and matter on one side versus the supreme God of mercy and spirit on the other.
I love this part because it literally operates exactly like a hostile corporate takeover. We fire the creator God and we install this new, previously unknown supreme God as the actual CEO of the universe.
The problem with the hostile theological takeover, though, is the existing paperwork.
Yes. So the paper trail.
You cannot just change leadership. You have to completely rewrite the company handbook. The existing early Christian scriptures were entirely grounded in the history of the creator God.
So what does he do?
Marcion became the first person in recorded Christian history to curate a specific closed canon of texts.
He had to physically construct his own Bible. But think about the mechanics of doing that in 144 CE. I mean, if you want to change a story today, you just open a document, hit Command F, find the character's name, and hit delete.
Exactly. It takes 2 seconds.
But Marcion is dealing with physical scrolls.
Yeah.
Handwritten in Greek uncial script, which, by the way, didn't even have spaces between the words.
It's just a solid block of letters.
Right. So trying to cleanly slice out an entire worldview from a text using an ink knife is a logistical nightmare.
It's an almost impossible editorial task.
Yeah.
So to minimize his workload, he just threw out massive amounts of material.
Just tossed it.
Yeah. He discarded the entire Old Testament immediately. And for his gospel, which he called the Evangelion, he kept only a heavily redacted version of the Gospel of Luke.
So Matthew, Mark, and John are just gone.
Thrown out entirely.
But wait, if he threw out the Old Testament and he threw out the original 12 apostles, because I assume he claimed they were corrupted by Jewish legalism?
Yes, that was his claim.
What did he even have left to preach from? He needs some kind of apostolic authority to legitimize this movement, right?
He leaned entirely on the Apostle Paul. Marcion created what he called the Apostolicon. It was a collection of 10 heavily edited letters from Paul.
Why Paul?
He believed Paul was the only apostle who truly understood that the gospel was a complete break from the creator God's religion.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. I want to push back on this logic.
Go for it.
If Marcion truly believed all matter, like everything physical, was evil because the flawed creator made it, how did he handle the fact that his own savior, Jesus, had to physically walk around on Earth?
That is the big question.
Right. You can't just delete gravity and physical bodies from a narrative.
No, you can't. And that tension is the core of Marcion's dilemma. It actually led him to enforce a really brutal lifestyle on his followers.
In what way?
Well, since matter is evil, you cannot participate in creating more of it. So he outlawed marriage. He outlawed procreation.
Wow. Just shut it all down.
His asceticism was so harsh, he refused to forgive anyone who lapsed under Roman persecution.
Goodness.
But you are entirely correct about the problem of Jesus' physical body. Marcion's theological workaround for this is a concept known as Docetism.
Docetism. So if physical bodies are evil, Jesus simply couldn't have had one. Is that it?
Precisely the logic. Docetism comes from a Greek word meaning to seem or to appear.
Ah, okay.
To Marcion, Jesus only seemed human. He was essentially a divine phantom.
A phantom.
Yes. In Marcion's edited Evangelion, Jesus doesn't have a human birth. He doesn't grow
Well,
up.
it just skips the whole manger scene.
Totally gone. He literally just descends out of heaven directly into the town of Capernaum as a fully formed adult apparition.
That is wild. And he even split the concept of the Messiah in two to make this work, right?
He did. He claimed there was a military, earthly Messiah promised by the Creator who was still coming. And then there was his phantom Christ sent by the supreme God.
Two gods, two Christs. It is a highly compartmentalized system designed to keep the physical world and the spiritual world completely segregated.
What's fascinating here is that trying to edit the physical world out of a first-century text is it's like trying to run a brand new app on an operating system that was fundamentally coded for a different machine.
It just doesn't work. The underlying architecture keeps crashing the new software.
Exactly. Think about the last time you tried to lie your way out of a complicated story.
Oh man, the details always get you.
Right. You might remember to change the big details, but it's the little things. A throwaway comment about the weather, a specific choice of words that trip you up.
And that's exactly what the authors of our paper expose. They use Marcion's own approved texts to watch his two-God theology completely unravel.
It really is brilliant. The paper highlights several incredible linguistic and narrative traps that Marcion just totally missed.
Give us an example. Where does he mess up first?
Let's start with a major failure in his Evangelion. In Luke 6.36, or as a verse Marcion kept, Jesus tells his followers, "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful."
Okay, but that sounds perfectly aligned with his brand, a supreme God of mercy.
On a surface reading, yeah, absolutely. But the authors dive into the specific Greek vocabulary. The word used for merciful here is oktirmen.
Like Tierman, okay. Why is that important?
Because the early Christians, including Marcion's own audience, read the Old Testament in Greek, a translation called the Septuagint.
Right.
And in the Septuagint, oktirmen isn't just a generic adjective. It is the specific, hard-coded word used to translate the foundational attribute of Yahweh in Exodus 34.6.
Oh, wow.
The Lord, a God merciful and gracious.
That is amazing. So by failing to change that specific word, Marcion accidentally left in a direct hyperlink back to the creator God of the Old Testament.
He did. He completely missed it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of how mercy operates, the logic of Marcionism completely breaks down. Think about what mercy actually implies. If this supreme God is a complete stranger to humanity, right, having never interacted with the physical world before Jesus, there is no framework to call him merciful.
Wait, yeah, because mercy requires a prior relationship.
Exactly. It requires a history of forbearance, of withholding punishment from someone who has broken your rules. The very concept of mercy anchors Jesus' Father to a long history with humanity.
Which only the creator God possesses.
Precisely.
You cannot show mercy to a stranger you just met. You can only show them kindness.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of kindness, just one verse prior in his own text, Luke 6.35 Marcion leaves another massive clue. Jesus calls God the Most High, which is a classic Old Testament title.
Yep.
And he says, this God is kind to the ungrateful by sending sun and rain.
That is a devastating oversight on Marcion's part.
Because sending sun and rain implies that this God is actively governing the physical material world.
He is managing the agricultural weather cycles. An alien, purely spiritual deity who utterly despises matter would not be in the business of distributing rain to earthly farmers.
No, that is unequivocally the job description of the creator.
It just completely undercuts his entire premise.
It really does.
Oh, yeah.
But I think my favorite cell phone in this whole textual forensic analysis has to do with jurisdiction.
Oh, yes, the Sabbath.
Yes. In Luke 6.5, Jesus explicitly claims to be Lord of the Sabbath. Now, the Sabbath is the ultimate institution of the Creator. It's literally grounded in the story of resting on the seventh day of making the physical world.
So to claim to be the Lord of it is a massive logical error for a supposedly alien Christ.
Right. It's an operating system mismatch. You can't claim to be the Lord or master of an institution that you have absolutely no jurisdiction over.
Right.
Like if Jesus represents a stranger God who had nothing to do with creation, claiming to be Lord of the Sabbath is like the CEO of Apple walking into a Ford factory and claiming he has the authority to rearrange the assembly line.
The workers would just look at him and say, you don't own this.
Exactly. By claiming authority over the Sabbath, Jesus is confirming he belongs to the God who built the factory in the first place.
Authority inherently implies ownership. It's inescapable.
Okay, so that's the gospel. But we should look at Marcion's Epistolicon too, because he relied on the Apostle Paul as his ultimate anti-Judaism champion.
He did, but the problem is, Paul was deeply Jewish, a former Pharisee.
Yeah, you can't just erase that.
Marcion tried. But his attempt to scrub Paul's letters of their Jewish roots was incredibly sloppy.
He placed Paul's letter to the Galatians at the very front of his custom canon, didn't he? Treating it as his star witness.
He did. And yet in Galatians 3:20, Paul emphatically declares, God is one.
Oh.
Yeah. This is a direct echo of the Shema, the central Jewish prayer from Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
So in the very document Marcion elevates to prove his two-God theory, his primary apostle explicitly states there's only one God.
It's right there in the text.
How does an editor miss that?
I mean, when you're editing with a knife, mistakes happen. But it gets even worse when you look at the mechanism of salvation Paul describes.
Okay, lay it on me.
In Galatians 3:10, Paul writes that Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law. Now, Marcion loved this phrase because he viewed the Creator's law as a literal curse.
Right. That fits his narrative perfectly.
But the paper's authors highlight the specific commercial metaphor Paul employs here. The Greek word is exogorasin.
Exogorasin, meaning what?
It means to buy out, to purchase, or to pay a ransom.
Wait, if you are paying a ransom or buying someone out of a debt, the debt has to be legally valid. You can't pay off a fake contract.
That is the exact logical landmine Marcion stepped on. You cannot pay a legal debt to redeem someone out of a jurisdiction that doesn't hold real authority.
Mind blown.
If the Creator God's law was just an evil sham from a lesser deity with no actual rights over human souls, Christ wouldn't need to redeem or buy out anyone.
The supreme God could just ignore the fake contract and walk away with humanity.
Exactly. The very fact that a ransom was paid legally validates that the Creator's law held real binding authority.
The forensic level of this textual analysis is just incredible. So his diatheism, his two-God theory, falls completely apart using his own preferred texts.
Completely.
But we have to address the phantom Jesus. How does Marcion's text handle the tension of a purely spiritual hologram walking around in a physical world?
Well, Marcion's Evangelion completely destroys his own phantom Jesus theory, too.
Yeah.
And the authors point to the resurrection narrative in Luke 24 as the ultimate proof.
This is where the theology turns into almost like physical comedy.
It really does. So in Luke 24, the resurrected Jesus is standing before his terrified disciples.
Right.
And he explicitly says, "See my hands and my feet, touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have."
And Marcion left in the specific Greek words.
Sarka kai ostea.
Flesh and bones.
Flesh and bones. He didn't cut it. Jesus is aggressively demanding that his followers verify his physical reality. He is actively distinguishing himself from a mere spirit or phantom. Exactly. If Jesus was actually a phantom, as Marcion's doctrine claimed, then in this highly edited, supposedly perfect text, the supreme messenger of the God of absolute truth is straight up lying to his followers.
He is orchestrating a deliberate physical deception.
Right.
And if the touch my flesh and bones speech wasn't enough to break the hologram theory, just 3 verses later, Jesus asks if they have any food.
Oh, the fish. Yes.
They hand him a piece of broiled fish and a honeycomb, and he eats it right in front of them.
The sheer absurdity of Marcion failing to redact this is staggering.
You have a supposedly immaterial anti-physical phantom sitting down to chew on a physical fish and digest a honeycomb.
A hologram cannot metabolize a fish.
No.
It is a profound, undeniable demonstration of physical embodiment that Marcion's editorial scissors just completely missed.
But there is a deeper philosophical trap Marcion fell into regarding the physical world, and it centers on an analogy he really loved to use, the good tree and the bad tree.
Ah, yes, from Luke 6. Jesus says a good tree brings good fruit, and a bad tree brings bad fruit.
Simple enough.
Yeah. And Marcion leaned heavily on this to justify his two-God system. He argued that because the material world contains disease, suffering, and death, the Creator who made it is the bad tree.
And the supreme God, who brings purely spiritual salvation, is the good tree.
Right. It sounds like a clean, logical binary.
But when you apply that logic to the rest of Marcion's own gospel, the whole system just collapses.
This raises an important question. If the Creator is a bad tree, and his physical world is inherently evil, then nothing truly good can exist within it.
Because a bad tree cannot produce a good apple.
Yet look at the behavior of Jesus throughout Marcion's text. He spends an enormous amount of time healing physical bodies.
He cures lepers, he heals paralytics, he restores sight.
Exactly. Why would the ultimate agent of the purely spiritual supreme God devote so much energy to fixing and repairing the physical handiwork of the evil creator?
It makes no sense. By actively restoring physical bodies and making them function properly, Jesus is implicitly endorsing the inherent goodness of the physical creation.
He's making a statement that this material reality is worth fixing, not just discarding.
The text even goes so far as to explicitly label elements of the material world as good, doesn't it?
It does. Take Joseph of Arimathea, the man who buried Jesus. In Marcion's own text, he forgot to edit out the description of Joseph.
What does it call him?
The Greek text explicitly calls him agathos, a good man.
But wait, if the entire material world and everything born into it is a bad tree, how can a physical material human being be labeled good?
By Marcion's own rigid logic, it's impossible. If the physical material world contains genuine goodness, if human bodies are worth the Savior's time to heal, if a material man can be called good, then the creator of that world cannot possibly be just a bad tree.
The analogy destroys the very ditheism it was meant to support.
It really does. It all falls apart.
It is the ultimate irony. I mean, Marcion tried to selectively edit an entire religion to fit his own radical bias. He was responding to the geopolitical pressures of his time, trying to hack away the messy, complicated Jewish history of Christianity because he couldn't reconcile the tension between the Old Testament creator and the New Testament savior.
Right.
But by missing a few crucial details, a specific Greek word for mercy, a commercial metaphor about a ransom, a piece of broiled fish, he accidentally preserved the exact historical and theological truth he was trying so desperately to erase.
It is a profound testament to the resilience of text and, more broadly, the resilience of complex truth. You can try to flatten reality into a simple, comfortable binary, a good God versus a bad God, spirit versus matter, but reality is stubbornly integrated.
It really is.
The texts Marcion preserved, when read closely and critically as these authors have done, they bear witness against him. They demonstrate that the narrative of a God who creates the physical world is inextricably linked to the God who acts to redeem it.
So, what does this all mean for you? Why does a frantic theological editing job from 144 CE matter today?
It's a fair question.
I think it serves as a powerful, timeless lesson in the dangers of confirmation bias and cherry-picking information. We live in an era where we constantly curate our reality. We block, we mute, we filter out perspectives that challenge our worldview, trying to construct a narrative feed that feels comfortable, clean, and binary.
We all do it to some extent.
Yeah, we do. But when you try to aggressively force data to fit your preferred narrative, when you take an ink knife to the complicated parts of reality, the truth usually leaves a stubborn fingerprint behind. You can't just delete the foundational code without the whole system crashing.
You can aggressively edit the document, but you can rarely erase the underlying logic of reality.
Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Imagine if someone, 100 years from now, were to take only a selectively edited pile of your digital life, just a fraction of your emails, a handful of texts, your most curated social media posts, and they tried to construct a definitive narrative about exactly who you are and what you believe. What small, accidental details, what completely overlooked throwaway comments or digital pieces of fish would you hope they leave in that would completely unravel their false narrative and reveal the real you?